And we're good to go.
All right.
So I thought this week we'll start a new series of videos and audio here about financial advice for people in different ages. So a couple of years back, I think 2022 was when I originally wrote these articles on, maybe even before that. I just created one blog post for every kind of age cohort. And what are some top things that sort of I think from my history would be useful bits of advice for people in that age group?
Everybody likes to share anecdotes, and
Exactly.
history, as they say, may not rhyme or repeat when it rhymes, right?
So in my own history, I started at a bank, and when I started at the bank, I originally started in the call center, and I would get the calls from just about everybody everywhere, all across Canada. If they were an old couple looking to renew some GICs, I was talking to them, or if they were some kid stuck, they couldn't get their money out of the ATM and something was wrong with their access card, I'd be
Okay.
talking to them. And then in a retail bank too, I'd see people, face to face. And also I saw a wide variety of people. And what kind of originally sparked this idea for me was kind of leveraging on those experiences, the the vastly different people I saw. And again, in our current profession, Justin and I, we see people who usually already have a pretty good head on their shoulders when it comes to investing to get to the point where they can actually see a financial planner or any type of wealth professional. We don't deal with 100% of the population. We probably deal with 10%, right? Or we figure the numbers are the top
Oh,
10%.
I don't know about 10%, but it's certainly a few years, into life, if I can
Yeah,
put
and
it
I
that
mean,
way.
there's
Yeah.
some self-selection too. And often I hear this, the studies that say that people that work with a financial planner are more likely to have a higher net worth. Well, it's kind of more the case of people with a higher net worth are more likely to work with a financial planner. That's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what I was kind of thinking is, what kind of advice can we give to someone in their 20s? What would I tell my 20-year-old self to do differently?
Foundational
In
stuff.
order
Yes.
foundational stuff, so that one day they
Mm-hmm.
can become clients of Justin or me,
Mm-hmm.
or some other advisor. Really, how do we cultivate more potential clients down the road? So, yeah, um,
It
what are
is.
your recollections of that age? I mean, going through engineering school, buying your
Ah,
first
oh
your first
boy.
condo.
Moving, student loans, car, vehicle, bills. I think my first credit card bill started coming up. My first paycheck started coming
Mm-hmm.
in.
Mm-hmm.
Brand new experiences. I actually didn't work a part-time job as a teenager. I worked at the family business, folding laundry or doing whatever, but I didn't get paid for it because it's a family thing, right? And so those were things that I had to learn and deal with. And then I guess on the second half of it, yeah, making a decision about my career, moving away, making a decision to buy a first property, a first home, and then again deciding how my career was going to go, and then also ultimately moving again, which that coincided almost exactly to the end of my 20s is when I left Fort McMurray and came down to Calgary.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's a huge dynamic decade in life, 12 years in life, and I mean, I just remember that there's a heck of a lot of experiences, and certainly, yeah, some advice I could think about, and I'll use that as a starting point. How about you? How about your 20s?
Yeah, I mean, very similar. For me, I like as soon as I became an adult, my parents moved out. So I didn't move out. I stayed in the same house. They moved
They
to
moved out.
Germany. My
Yes.
dad's
Yeah.
job took him there. So all of a sudden I was living very independently.
Mm-hmm.
I was of course getting money from them to take care of the house and things like that. And also I was working at first while I was in university, and then I decided to stop working to concentrate more on school. But some of the things that come to mind in terms of financial when when you're starting out at that age. Um, First credit card, and this is something where I've seen the worst of it working at the bank. In terms of what people do with credit cards, I got my first credit card in I guess I was probably 18, 19. was one of those Oilers themed MBNA MasterCards. It was advertised in some magazine. Didn't come with any kind of benefits. It just, I think I was supposed to get a free hat after I did my first transaction, but they never sent me the hat. Didn't get any points or anything is what I mean, but
Yeah.
no fee credit card. And somehow I was able to get, I didn't think about it all. I didn't know anything about credit ratings and stuff like that. I just figured I'm an adult. I can probably get a credit card now. And, the internet was becoming more of a thing. And in order to buy something online, you needed a credit card. And it would get to have in restaurants and stuff like that too. So I got that card, and I got the first credit card bill, looked at that, and, it would tell me you pay a minimum of this much and otherwise pay the whole balance off. And it was only through that, it wasn't really trial and error, but I kind of figured out there, if I keep that balance, if I only pay the minimum, I'll have to pay a lot of interest because that interest rate was 20% or something like that. It was always high. So that made no sense to me, paying that kind of an interest rate. So for me, it was natural paid off. If I have the money in my bank account, I only use the credit card so that I could, pay for a restaurant meal or something like that. It's not borrowed money. So I paid it off in full. But a lot of young people don't do that. A lot of people see that minimum payment as that's their payment. And now I have, I can save that money for other stuff. I don't have to pay that all off yet. I have some time to pay it off.
$10 a month.
$10, like $10 minimum payments. And back then they didn't explain, nowadays they have to in the credit card, right? That if you make a minimum payment, it will take 20 years to pay it off, right? Back then they didn't. And I see a lot of people, a lot of peers got into trouble that way. Sometimes because they just didn't have the financial resources to pay it off in full. Maybe some bad stuff happened, car broke down, and so they needed to borrow some money, and that was readily available. But it, for some people, was normalized carrying a balance, making minimum payments. And my biggest bit of advice to anyone, any young person, younger, kids of clients, people like that, is don't normalize that. Even if all your peers do, it is not normal, and it should not be acceptable to live beyond your means for your basic day-to-day living, and to be carrying credit card balances or consumer credit card balances or anything else like that. If you can't afford to pay off that full balance, you just don't buy it. The reason why this is so important is, and this is what I saw at the bank, sometimes I'd be dealing with someone for a couple of years, young person, had a credit card, got into some trouble with that, also did some dumb stuff with the bank, like depositing empty envelopes, which is, I don't think you can do that nowadays because I think you just put the check in, right? And
no envelopes anymore.
There's no more envelopes. But back then you could put an envelope into the bank machine and say, this is $200. And of course the bank machine believes you until someone actually opens up the envelope. And then it's not like you trick the bank. The bank is still going to look at that envelope and see there's nothing in that envelope.
Yeah.
And you're not only going to get that debited from your account, you're going to get some really nasty messages put on your account. And that bank is probably not ever going to give you a mortgage. And this is another reason why I wrote that blog post is for young people in that age range, like 18, 19, 20, they can make massive, massive financial errors that completely just mess them up for the rest of their lives financially. It can anyways. And whether it's something fairly minor, like you can tick that bank off the list of ones who will give you a mortgage down the road, or you really mess up your credit and that goes onto the bureau. And that was something too I learned in my banking days, that there's this thing called credit, or are these things called credit bureaus who keep track of this stuff. And it's basically like it's a score, literally a score. You're being scored on how good you are with money. Yeah. And you can't say, oh, I was a dumb 18-year-old when I did this stuff. And that's no excuse. If you're 27 and you want to get that first mortgage, the stuff you did back then can potentially still carry over, or some bad habits that carried on from there can still carry over and make it more difficult, make it more costly should you want to buy that first home.
So understanding that reality, and I would say that you can use your card, but make sure take a look at your statement. Combine that with like your review of potential fraud, right? Make sure that you just take a look at your statement, make sure that everything looks okay. Pay what you have to pay. If you can clear it all at the end of the month, fantastic, right? Ideally,
all of it should be the norm, and part of it should be the exception. Minimum payments should be the exception, only when things go awry for you, right?
And again, life happens, right?
it's important to start building that credit early too. And this is where there's some myths, and at least I experienced some myths when I was at the bank, because I sometimes deal with a parents coming in with their newly adult child. How do we build some credit? Can we apply for a loan? Just get a loan, and then they'll pay it off over time to build that credit. That's garbage. There's no point in doing that. The
Hmm.
quickest and best way is a credit card, and it is paying it back in full every month. Some people have this myth as well that if you only make minimum payments, somehow that helps build credit a little
Hmm.
faster. It
Hmm.
doesn't. It just
Yeah.
when you start to have some kind of a report to the credit bureaus, and as long as that report continues to be good, it builds credit, and it's very quick with the credit cards because that's monthly reporting that the banks are always checking it on it monthly as well. Um, that's really all it takes. And then from there on, when you do get to that point where you need that mortgage or car loan or whatever, you should by then already have a pretty good base established, as long as you didn't do anything wrong, really. Yeah.
It's
One other thing I wanted to say too, like in terms of having consumer debt, I mean that's one strike. You should not have consumer debt unless it is a kind of a one-off situation. The other thing too, and I've witnessed, peers, coworkers, or I've known customers when I was at the bank who went into payday loan shops. And I remember seeing those commercials for the first time on TV when maybe I was a teenager still, didn't really understand money. Why are they advertising free money? Like, sure, sign me up, $100, $200. Like, it sounds like they're just basically giving away free money. It seems like such a sweet deal. What are these shops even
hmm
doing?
hmm
What's their business? And of course, not understanding the repayment schemes that are in place there, the massive predatory interest rates, and how those shops, they exist. They're out there. You see them all along, 118th Ave or Stony Plain Road, right?
yeah.
But if you ever set foot in one, consider it a failure. Consider it like, yeah, okay, maybe something happened. That's why I'm there. How do I avoid ever setting foot in here again, other than to repay the loan? It should not become a thing, like a regular thing where, because payday is 2 weeks away, that you need to go into here to get some money for now. You should just try to not be in that situation, because if you can avoid that, if you can start out early with, putting yourself in the right position, you're not going to lose that much money on interest. And what I'm kind of trying to get to with this is one really big, important thing. The most powerful thing anyone young can do financially is build an emergency fund. People think, should I start saving for retirement, start TFSA this, RSP that, investing, stocks? We'll get to that in a second. But by far, the most powerful thing at the age of 18, 19, 20 is having some kind of an emergency fund, whatever it is, a few $1,000s in a savings account, 10,000, whatever you can fit in your budget, really. Because if you can put yourself in a situation where when something bad happens, you don't ever have to go to a payday loan shop. You don't have to go to the bank of mom and dad to get some money. It's just, that's power. That's financial power. Your friends, they might be in trouble. They might be in a bind when something bad happens. But if you have that money saved up, that's what, there's nothing better, right? At that age, who cares if you have
Well,
money in
yeah.
an RSP?
It provides that's timeless again, and not just for your 20s, but your 30s, your 40s,
Mm-hmm.
your 50s, and the rest of your life, right? Is to have easily accessible liquid funds, financial funds that you can use in case something comes up. And yeah, maybe it's $100 or something, but it's enough to certain happen. The payday loan thing, I mean, at one point people used to get physical paychecks every 2 weeks, right? And so the banks are closed by the time the shift was over. I got to go
Mm-hmm.
have a drink after work, but so what am I going to do? I'm going to go over
Get that
there,
check
sign
cashed.
off,
Yep.
right? So I mean, but I would say there's similar um, businesses, operations that operate like a payday loan uh, business, but might be hidden, right? It might be like pay as you go to buy a furniture, or
Mm-hmm.
buy now, pay later sort of ideas. Suffice to say, I think it is a good example. But emergency funds for me, I think, are there for the just in case, right? You're at an age early on in your 20s where you may not have, certainly unlikely to have dependents, unlikely to have a lot of
You're
debt,
your own
right? To a
dependent.
bank. Yeah, and so insurance and all that may not be as much of an issue, but that emergency fund, that backup thing, just in case, right? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
some people might even use the credit card as their emergency thing. Just make sure that you pay that off again, right? Right away, as you said,
Yep,
right?
yep.
But you want to have something just in case. Line of credit, credit card,
And
$500 in the
you
savings
bring up
account, separate, right?
you bring up line of credit. A line of credit's a wonderful thing to have, as opposed to a credit card for emergency. So when you build up your credit over some time, if you can build up your credit, when it comes to credit scores, so not to get too much into detail here, but 650 is a magical number. It's called a FICO score for Fair Isaac Company, I think, were the people that originated
Surgeon. Mm-hmm.
the calculation. It's a completely proprietary calculation. They won't tell you exactly how they calculate this stuff, but 650, as far as when I was at the bank, that is where the bank kind of considers that's what the bank considers the dividing line between subprime and prime. Some people will say, oh, a score over the 600s is anything over 600 is pretty good. No, that's wrong. 650, if you're at 650, you're basically marginally subprime. And what that means is simply the bank is not going to have as many products available to you. So when I was in the bank, an unsecured line of credit, we did not do unsecured line of credit if your beacon was under 650. The application didn't even start. We didn't look at your income, anything like that. If you're still at 650, fail, try again another week, month, whatever. Once you're over 650 and ideally over 700, I think 700 I'd consider pretty average decent. That's where you have unsecured line of credits available. You might get a pretty decent rate on it. The thing about interest rates too is your credit score does not necessarily dictate your interest rate. So it's not like if you have an 800 score, you're going to get a lower interest rate than if you have a 700 score. That might make no difference at all. It's simply a matter of what products are available to you. So again, if you're like well below 700, what's available to you? Consolidation loan, high interest rate, strict repayment requirements, and it's also not seen as very good on just in general. Like if you are applying somewhere else and they see you have a consolidation loan, they're going to assume you've got a problem with consumer debt and you might not get that mortgage. Again, we're almost talking mortgages. But over 700, you got unsecured line of credit available. You might have higher limits available as well, which is also a good thing in terms of your credit, because one of the things we do know about how they score the credits, how they do their credit scores, whichever credit bureau we're talking about, is utilization. And this is why, sometimes if the bank is telling you have a pre-approval for more credit line, depending on your situation, you might actually want to take it. If you're good with your credit, you're not going to put yourself in a position where you're going to max it out. If you typically spend $2,000 or $1,000 a month on your credit card and you always pay it off, having your limit at $3,000, you're actually using a big chunk of your credit limit, and that does not look good on your score. Versus having your limit at $10,000, then you're using a much smaller percentage of your limit and not really ever getting over that 50% mark. That helps your score too. So we talk about emergency fund. That's, again, a very powerful thing to have. I've had people come to me in the past for fee-only financial planning. And in one example, a young lady had nothing really saved up yet, not even emergency fund. And somehow she got in her head that it's good to see a financial plan or pay for a financial plan. Well, financial plan's going to cost you a couple $1,000, even a fairly basic one. In your situation, you should not be spending that kind of money on a financial plan. Really, the very first thing you should do is build up an emergency fund. Don't invest in the markets. And I've had young people ask me too, what should I invest in? I have this $2,000 I saved up from work. What should I invest in? Nothing. Put it into a savings account until you have 10,000. When you have 10,000, you've got yourself in a pretty good situation where now, you have that coverage for when bad things happen. Now, any excess dollar, maybe now you can look at investing that long term. That's another bit of advice I would give my past self, and I've talked about this in past podcasts. How I saved some money from one of my first jobs and invested it in high-tech mutual funds back in 1999. So the worst time.
How could you do that?
Had I built an emergency savings fund, that would have been much more useful. I didn't need it, but it would have put myself in a better financial position, I think, if I just kept that in an emergency savings until I had more money saved up.
I think that with some of the topics that you've brought up already. And I think it's fantastic that that individual came to you and said, "Hey, this is just something I'm aware of.
Yeah,
Is this worth my time doing?" Obviously, you give the appropriate response and said, "You know
I think
what?
it's the best free advice you could have gotten.
Yeah," and just said, "You know what? You got the right mentality. Get your get your ducks in a row. Get a certain what we think are some priorities first, and then down the road we can have a more fulsome or just develop those things when you actually have the ability in order to doing so." So I don't knock them, people to ask those questions because obviously they're thinking forward, right? But the topics that you talked are almost like basic personal finance, right? Stay within your cash flow, manage your spending, be mindful of what you're looking to do, and it's these are very very formative years, right? And
Hmm.
frankly speaking, like one more year of starting in your 20, I of course the numbers compound over time. I understand that the power of compounding in time, and you're never going to get an extra year time in your life, right? You might be able to get an extra dollar, right? So you have to take this into context. But um it's such a dynamic time in your life that I feel like you want to be able to have the ability to explore options of all kinds, and to sock away something into, say, an investment account where you really should be thinking more on the long term, right? And to do an investment when there's so many things that could happen in that time frame, in that 5 years, 10 years. I talked about all the things that happened in that decade for me, right? That it would be nice to have some of that, to have that instead of blocked up in an RSP, for example, to actually utilize for something else, right? So,
Hmm.
but it's fantastic to get into financials. But personal financial awareness, I think, is some of those things. Be financially aware, understand your cash flows, minimize the risks of fraud, things of that nature. Be just and be proactive and start reading and thinking about things down the road. But don't think that's immediately you need to do this in order to become an adult.
Hmm.
You don't need to have a mortgage right away to be an adult. You don't need to have all your investments accounts set up to be an adult. No, there's a lot of
Yep.
adulting to happen in the rest of your life, right? There's, I think, more important things, and I'll touch upon this later, but I think it's really careers. I think what a lot of people need to focus on more so than and then spending time, deciding which ETF to buy.
And you're bringing up some good topics of careers and optionality, which is kind of the next thing I wanted to get into here. Bit of advice I wish I gave myself. You probably would have wanted to give that same advice to you. We talked about it during our episode on condominium horror stories.
Mm-hmm.
Is rent, don't buy a home. And it goes so
Yes and
opposite
no.
from
Yes,
what
yes,
so many
yes,
people tell
yes.
us,
Yeah,
right? They tell us,
yeah,
you got to start building. That's what people were telling me back then. Start building equity. Stop wasting your
yeah,
money on rent. You're not getting
yeah,
anything for that.
yeah.
But having not owning a home, the optionality that gives you in your career and the ability to move, like you,
Mm-hmm.
Justin, you were at the beginning of your career up in Fort McMurray, and then
Yeah,
you originally were from Edmonton, went to Fort McMurray, then now you're in
yeah.
Calgary. You're still living with the downsides of having that property in Fort Mac. We don't need to get
Oh, I
into the
did.
details on
I
that,
did.
but
That cleared up, but it was a
refer
20-year
back.
saga. Yeah.
Yeah, the saga is on our episode about condo horror stories. I'll probably link
Yeah.
it in the blog post for this because I think it's very, very appropriate for this subject area. But myself too, I bought a condo in, what year was it? 2008, right before the financial crisis. So I was 27, and I could have rented for a little while longer. I could have had more optionality, and there was still a chance at that time my job might have taken me somewhere else like Toronto or Vancouver. And I
Mm-hmm.
did have peers who that happened. They did have to move to some other city because their careers took them there, and they still had to own that condo in Edmonton that was impossible to sell now because the
Mm-hmm.
market plummeted, and it
Mm-hmm.
really in condos it's just barely recovered by now. So for that reason, renting is so awesome. If you need to move, you can rent. You can quit that property within 6 months. The worst you can lose is 6 months or maybe a year worth of rent if you lock yourself into some kind of contract. But it's not going to put you in that position where you need to sell a massive property, a massive investment for yourself, sell it and then buy something else, worry about the financing terms, breaking a mortgage, that kind of stuff. Wait till you're older and you're looking to buy your first maybe forever home, whatever your situation is. When you know
The
you're in a
first
job
forever
where
home.
you're going to be, yeah, whatever, a job. I mean, a home where it's close to where you're going to work your career, or, where you can actually raise a family and not a condo, right? Condos are
Mhm.
terrible.
Well, that's
Moving
right.
on, anyways, to I think the reason why, if anyone listens to our podcast or watches our videos, they probably want to hear about investments. And of course, investing is fun and exciting, and that's why, if you're talking to someone at a party and you tell them you're an investment advisor, they're probably going to want to ask your stock tips, right? Or ask you something about investing. That's the interesting thing we do in our lives. So even though we've
Yeah.
kind of highlighted all these other areas where you should be focusing on if you're in your 20s, if you get to the point where you've checked off all those check boxes, you got your credits under control, you have some emergency savings, you've got your cash flow situation figured out and stuff like that. You want to start investing, and there's a lot of people out there that want to sell you investments, right? What would you suggest to someone getting started investing?
So again, based off of experience and then also based off of clients who they themselves are actually in their 20s, when I look at it, what I would probably suggest early on is to learn, right? Underlying investments, yes, I think there's a certain order of accounts that we could take into consideration, say, this is the type of investment you should look at focusing on at this time of your life, right? And then, but other than that, on top of that, early on, I think just broad, um, broad index type oriented investments is an excellent way to start off with. Early on, just having that saving mentality, socking it away to an FHSA or to TFSA, excellent ideas. But I think, yeah, the primary focus is just, paying yourself first, as they say.
What matters the most is how much you're saving, your savings habits, and then really what your asset allocation is, and if that aligns with your goals, whether you're saving for something 10 years down the road, 5 years, or 20 years down the road. I've kind of, in a way, I've seen religion when it comes to investing, because when I first started out, like I said, one of my first investments was going into high tech, because that was really the sexy investment in 1999, 2000. And, working at a bank too, you get very enthusiastic about, particular funds, particular fund managers, dividend investing. And over the years, I've kind of realized that there's a lot of marketing in this industry. There's a lot of there's a lot of fees embedded in investments too. Sometimes investing a little bit more boring works out better for you, especially when you're starting out. When you're starting out small, you're really it doesn't matter what fund you're going in. If anyone's managing, if it's unmanaged and it's a Vanguard fund or an iShares fund or whatever, it matters very little. And I have my first prop here. If you can see it on the video here. This is a Galton board, is what it's called. This is given to me by Mark Hebner at last year's Future Proof. Mark Hebner is, I think he's head of an RIA in the US called Index Fund Advisors. And so he was giving these away there. And what this shows you, it's kind of a bell curve. Anyone who's in their 20s and watching this, if they've done a stats course, an introductory stats course, they might know what a bell curve is, but kind of they show the distribution of probability, really. And what's happening here, and I've got this turned upside down now, but if you can bear with me, what's happening here is there's 6,000 little beads at the bottom here. There's one little gold one you can probably barely see at the very top there.
Take a look for it.
Yep. And what they do is, once gravity is pushing them that way, they kind of go through each of these little hexagons. And those hexagons, each of them kind of has a 50-50 chance the ball bounces left or bounces right. Now that happens a bunch of times. I guess, how many rows here? 13 times. And at the end of the day, the balls end up being distributed into a bell curve. And I'll show you that in action.
It's Plinko.
Did it work? Plinko, is that what it's called?
Well, whoever Price is Right, he goes landed you got the disc on the top, right? You see where it would land.
Yeah. So what's supposed to happen here? Let's see now. Where's the gold ball? Did it get stuck somewhere? It's way at the bottom here. So it ended up on the bottom of this one right here, and this column right here. So it just shows you this. What I'm getting at with this thing is, market returns also kind of follow a bell curve. There will be years when the markets do very well and when they do poorly, and then there will be more when the markets kind of return in the middle. Consider that yellow or the gold ball as 1 year on the markets, and basically it's running through 6,000 instances. and it's very unlikely to end up in the very, very high end of the return curve. The other thing too is individual stocks act that way. Some stocks do very well, some stocks not so well, and sometimes it's really a crapshoot whether you happen to have bought a stock at a cheap price and you're going to see a good return on it, versus not. And that brings me to basically index investing, which is what obviously Mark Hebner is I mean, it's in the name of his company. It's what he's keen on. And some books to help investors get started out investing right. And I've got those over here. First book, a really easy read by Jack Bogle, guy who started Vanguard, is Common Sense Investing, the little book of Common Sense Investing. And it's near the top, I think, of my recommended books in terms of anyone just getting started. And then Jack has his own kind of, you have to realize anyone that writes a book, they're not the be all end all. They have their own kind of biases and philosophies. And for example, Jack Bogle didn't believe in international investing. I think he was wrong in that, but it at least gets you kind of thinking of, does it make sense really for most of us to be spending a lot of money on active management when we could simply own the entire market? And ideally, in my case, I recommend owning not just the US market, not just Canada, but owning all the world markets. And really, the outcome, if you go with an active fund, the outcome also follows that bell curve. Some do really well, some do poorly. And at the end of the day, it's hard to know which active fund is going to outperform. So the index fund will more likely end up in the middle anyways. It's not going to have a outperformance or an underperformance relative to the overall benchmark. It's going to be pretty much right at what the benchmark does minus a fee. So why not just own that? And again, if you want to keep things simple, you're just starting to invest, there's a lot of great products out there that allow you to build a diversified portfolio with just one fund, for example.
I skew more on the active side, as I've referenced in the past as well. I incorporate the index funds as well in a number of different situations where I like to provide something a little more personalized. And I have seen the benefits of having a tilt towards one particular sector, one particular name, one particular whatever, right? But just getting involved in understanding. Some people want to be a little bit more hands-off, right? And some people want to be very hands-on. And I think this is where you get that spectrum of people where, what is this important to you? We touched on it briefly. I do think I'll go back to it and say that in that time frame, in that age, the biggest wealth generating aspect of your entire life is your career. It's where you earn your keep, where you earn your paycheck,
and that's where you should be focusing your attention.
And how you compound that over the years. Exactly, right? And so, but if you wanted to start on that investment side, start off small. Don't get too cute, too aggressive, too esoteric, and then from there you can kind of then start building off. But again, focus on core, and core being, I think, career. And then secondary, when we get to the investments.
And if you keep it simpler and pay less attention to it and are less excited about your investments, you usually end up with a better outcome. And so the more exciting your investments are, the more interested you are in your investments, probably the less likely you're going to have a good outcome. This is just on the overall averages, nothing against how you do things, Justin.
No. Yeah.
The typical average... Yeah. They have these stats. The typical average discount brokerage type investor has an average return less than or roughly what T-bills did. That's according to Dalbar. And there's others that have done that study. And there's different inputs. And there's also some debate about the merits of these studies. But typically what happens is people, when they pay a lot of attention to the markets or pay a lot of attention to their investments and overtrade, it usually ends up with lower returns than if you simply ignore and forget. Another great example was brought up years ago by Fidelity, where Fidelity Investments, they said, of all of our clients, the ones that had the best returns over a certain time period were the ones who actually were deceased clients. Passed away.
They orphan accounts that were were just left.
They just, the money got left and it kept growing. Other clients who did well were the ones in deferred sales charge funds. And I'm not, again, totally against that, but they're not even allowed anymore. But people with deferred sales charge funds were less likely to want to sell and trade and change their investments, even though in that structure you could make changes to your investments if you wanted to. But they typically did less.
No, that's right. And I think the underlying theme there, irrespective of the style of investing that you have,
Another
it's
good book.
behavior.
Sorry.
It's behavior. So you're bringing,
Behavior. Yeah.
you're holding
Just
up a
keep
book.
buying.
Just keep buying over the long term, irrespective of the price that you enter in, right? As long as you continue to invest over time, it's going to grow, right? And so
Mhm.
that is one book that in the last couple of years is captured some attention and in our circles.
So that
Behaviorally,
is Just Keep Buying by Nick Majuli. All links to these will be on the post as well.
one book I would suggest if you want to give a gift to a student this year or someone who's starting off is The Psychology of Money. I know that has been a book that oh, there he is, he's holding it right there. That
Mhm.
both Marcus and I have given to clients as well to read, particularly the younger ones as well, to kind of get an idea that a lot of it is in between the ears, right? It's not
Mhm.
so much on the spreadsheet on the screen. It's really what's in between the ears, and that reflects in a lot of things in life. But what is the psychology, and how do you work with it? How do you deal with it? One kind of non-business related book that I would suggest actually had a major impact on my life. And it's not the one you're thinking about, Marcus. Actually, it's another one that I thought of. But I did read it in high school, and it's Death of a Salesman, Arthur Miller. And it
Mhm.
is, it's the American tragedy of somebody who has visions of grandeur and sometimes how that doesn't align with reality, the relationships between his children, his family, between the people he works with. And what I would say, yeah, it's still, I have it on my bookshelf at home. And oddly enough, I am somebody who has two sons and who is working in a world that has some sales component of it. But that's one thing I wanted to address, is that everything you do in life has a sales component. Sales is not something that
Mhm.
you should poo-poo. Is what you're doing is that you're trying to be persuasive. You're trying to tell a story, whether it's about yourself, why you deserve that promotion, why you think that you deserve that job in that job interview, right?
So wrapping it up, this is a little thing I do at the end of each of these blog posts on well, these blog posts on advice for people in different age groups. And
It's
I
a
used to do one
pyramid.
of these. It's a Maslow's hierarchy,
It's a hierarchy,
in a
yes.
way. Um, I used to do one of these for every financial plan because a lot of
Hmm.
financial planning is kind of how do you prioritize different things, and
Yes.
everyone's got a completely different hierarchy. Some people
Hmm.
might have they're a younger couple and they've got education planning, retirement planning, insurance planning, this and that. And so it's a little bit different for everyone. The way to read this is really from the bottom up. So again, anyone listening to this will be on the blog post that accompanies this, or just go straight to the original blog post, which is nuhs.ca/fp20, just fp20. So really at the bottom is, if you're in your 20s, the first thing to take care of is make sure your cash flow is in good shape and your credit's in good shape. Be cash flow positive. Don't carry credit card balance. Really, until you've got that plank satisfied, you shouldn't worry about anything above it. Just get into a really good cash flow situation, then move on. Then make sure you've got a nice emergency fund. Then move on from there. Then you're thinking about your living situation. Maybe it makes sense to rent or maybe not, but don't be pressured into buying a home. And then maybe retirement planning is worth thinking about. And towards the top there, I put insurance planning. We didn't really touch on that, but we probably will with the next episode where it starts to become more important. But in terms of insurance planning, really with insurance, you're kind of planning for leaving something behind for your dependents. And if you're in your 20s, you don't really have dependents yet. However, it can still be very, very cheap to get insurance, to get some term policy. So did I miss anything on this, Justin? Do you think
No, I think it's an excellent visual.
at the very, very top of it, you see that anything else? That's the other stuff that young people are interested in: buying crypto, speculative investing, buying Nvidia, trading stocks, in this case, buying your first
I,
home is up there, buying a
I,
fancy new
yeah.
car.
Let me show you one thing. My thought for the day is that it's a young, vibrant age. There's so many things you can do in your life. You can make a lot of mistakes. You can afford. You should be attempting to make a lot of mistakes in your life at that time. I wish I made more mistakes. I won't go to the ones I wish I would make, but that's for next time. But one memory that I thought about, and it's true. Like I was in Fort McMurray. I was single and all of that. I once paid 600 American dollars for one meal for myself, individual, just myself. This was in Las Vegas. It was
In
at a Michelin
Fortnite or
star
Vegas? Okay.
in Las Vegas,
Yeah.
right? It's Michelin, my first time ever in Vegas, Michelin star restaurant. Enjoyed the food thing. I had disposable income where I could say I could do that without bankrupting me or making an issue. I could get my credit card, right? But that
Mhm.
meal from 2008, 16 years later, or whatever the case may be, people still ask me about that. I have the menu downstairs in the basement. It's
You
personalized, has my
remember the
name on
meal? Was it
has the
really good?
date.
Was it
They
worth that?
printed out the menu. It's overrated, actually, is what it was. But the experience in
Yeah.
itself, right? To be able to try some of those things, the environment, the service. 14, 15 years later, I still have explicit memories of that, right? Of some of the smells and tastes of it. And so take those opportunities too, to be able to provide yourself those options and maybe do something like that, because you do something in
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
20s, you got your entire life to talk and think about it. Whereas you do something in your 40s or 50s or 60s, you can only think about it and share about it for another 10, 20 years. I've been talking about it already for 15 years, and I'll be doing the end for another 30, 40, 50, right? So
You bring up
that's a
something good,
balance.
and
I guess it's a
this. If I was,
balance, right?
yeah, if I was going to give some kind of advice to my past self, um, spend more money in experiences. And my biggest vice really is I like stuff. I've spent way too much on cars in my lifetime, more than I should have. Having a new
Yeah.
car every 5 years. I bought my first brand new car in 2006. Yeah, the Oilers were just in the finals.
Mm-hmm.
VW GTI. I went for the leather seats,
You
six
like your
speed.
German cars. We know you like your German
I like my
cars. Yeah.
fast cars. Yeah, it was a fun, really fun car to drive. And then stupidly, like 4 years later, I buy a newer version of the same car. I bought a 2010 VW GTI
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted the paddle shifters. And I mean, each time. So I mean, I was not making a ton of money yet.
Yeah.
I had some HELOC room, some home equity line of credit room, or I got a car loan. I just wanted that nice new car. And
We're
really, when I
human.
got that new car, when I was about to get the new car, I was like super excited getting this new car. Bye
Yeah.
bye old car.
Yeah.
But then once I was in that new car, after a while, it's an old car, and then I want the next big thing. And it's that, or it's things like having a nice home entertainment system or fast computer to play video games on. Um, so much money was wasted on that, and not enough on experiences like vacations or good meals and things like that. And I just wish I spent more on that, because that kind of stuff. Yes, I do. I do remember driving my GTI, but that was a very expensive memory versus like having a great meal. I mean, I was in Vegas too. I ate at it was one of Bobby Flay's restaurants. It was also very expensive, and I still remember that meal. It was great. Some more of that, memories. You remember that, and it doesn't matter what age you are in, but when you're in your 20s, for sure, create memories. Go on that trip to Europe, whatever. That you're not going to be able to do that forever, and those memories will be with you forever.
If you don't do it in your 20s, start doing it in your 40s.
Do it in your 30s or your 40s or whatever. Yeah, yeah.
A good comment. Again, balance. Provide yourself. It's not all dollars in your life, right? The dollars are not meant to be an end goal. They're a means for other things, right? That's ultimately what it's a tool. And for all the talk that we've had today, it'll allow those planning and thinking about provides you, I think, opportunities again to experience or have those experiences, or to provide yourself the option to do it should you want to do it. Or maybe you do get a nice car and you enjoy driving around here, right? It's to yours, right? Decision, but just put yourself and try to better yourself in this your position in order to be able to have that option. Again, optionality, I think, is so critical. Thanks for sharing.
All right.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that.
I guess we will. Yeah.